Good morning, everyone. Oh, well, that came loud to me. Let's just pray. Father, we thank you that we can meet freely today. Help us to listen to your promptings this morning. Amen. So we'll begin with a question. How are you at decision making? If you were asked a question and had a choice of one of three boxes to tick, yes, no, or don't know, which would you tend to opt for? Now, clearly it all depends on the nature of the question, and for some you'll have an immediate response, and for others it may require a bit more consideration. But essentially we do tend to know if we're pretty good at making decisions or not. But I'm thinking today about big decisions, about important decisions, decisions that will impact our lives. How do we feel about those? These are the scary decisions. They're the ones that sometimes we just want someone else to choose for us. Have you ever been there? I know I definitely have. And these are the times when there is a deciding moment. A major choice is required. We're at a significant point in our lives. We've reached a fork in the road. And that is today's message. A fork in the road. We'll get there eventually. While choosing one direction over another is never easy. We don't know exactly where it will lead. And really, we'd like to know everything in advance before we make our choice, but big decisions just aren't like that. They can be incredibly uncomfortable. So I've adapted a story by someone called Umair Haq, which highlights this, and it may give you a bit of food for thought. One day, a weary traveller came to a fork in the road. He was desperate to find his way home. "But which way is mine?" he cried. The fork replied gently, "All these roads will lead you home." The man, offended by the fork's illogical comment, didn't even notice for a moment that the road was speaking to him. "How can that be? This road goes left, that road goes right. I am seeking the end of the road, but only the right road. That is my way home. It's everyone's way home," he added. And the fork laughed. "All these roads will lead you home," it said to the weary traveller again, this time a bit more gently. Well, the traveller was enraged, and then he despaired, and finally he began to think. Now, he was a doctor, and he had an analytical mind. He looked at the mud beside the road, the clay beside the mud, and the sticks lying in the clay, and he rubbed his hands together, smiling triumphantly at his cleverness as an idea lit up in his mind. "I will take both roads," he thought. So from the clay and the mud and the sticks, and from items he had in his bag, he built a little machine. It had wheels and eyes and even a little computer. And he told it, "You take that road and I'll take this one, and every day send me a message about what lies on the other path." The machine looked up at him and nodded. "I have defeated you," said the man to the road proudly. "Now I know how. I will simply come back here and take the other road if what I see is better." The road frowned and laughed gently again. "All these roads," it whispered, "will lead you home." The man took one path, striding confidently, weary no longer, and off the machine rolled, bumping along the other road on its tiny wooden wheels. He may have called it Alexa. I'm not really sure about that. Soon the man arrived in a small town, a place surrounded by fields, smiling faces and laughter, and seeking refreshment he went into an inn. And there he saw the most wonderful woman he'd ever seen. He tried to look away. After all, he was just a very tired, crumpled traveller. And yet it wasn't long before they met and got to know each other. And they married. They moved to a house near the square, children followed, and the man worked as a doctor, treating the townspeople. Now all this happened faster than he could say or even really know, and no plan or intention of his own had been given. And so the man forgot all about the fork in the road, the message, his plan, and the machine. He hadn't thought about that strange, impossible, fateful day at all since it had happened. He'd never checked the messages from the other side of the road once. He'd been too busy seeing his children being born, enjoying life with his wife, healing the people of the town. Every day was a little miracle. And while he didn't think that, he was a very analytical man after all. But deep in his heart, he knew it. And one day his youngest daughter said, "Dad, can we climb that mountain?" Pointing to the little hill just outside the town, which looked so great and forbidding a peak. And he laughed and said, "Of course we can." So off they went, the man, his wife, the children. They took sandwiches and juice and set off. And soon enough they arrived at the top of the hill. And the little girl squealed with delight, running in circles around the rocks. The man looked off into the distance, seeing the town, its green fields, its little roads and squares and people, all laid out in front of him. It was just as if he was seeing something for the very first time, but he didn't know what, and he fell into a deep contemplation. "Dad!" the little girl cried, interrupting his reverie. "What's this?" And he looked at what she was holding, and his heart skipped a beat. There it was, the tiny wooden wheels, the little eyes of shining pebbles. "Is it an animal?" the little girl asked. He struggled for words. "No," he said, "it's not an animal. It's something I made myself many years ago." "Why did you make it?" asked the little girl. "Because," and he paused for a moment, "I wanted to know the answer to a mystery, a question." He was about to ask the little machine, "What did you see?" But then he looked at his daughter. He looked at his wife. And he thought of the day he stood at the fork in the road, the tiredness that he'd felt then, his desperate pleas, his need for an answer, and the pride he had felt at his plan to outwit the road. And suddenly it struck him. He'd hardly gone anywhere at all. He'd made it just 1 mile down the road, and there he'd stayed. Right there, he'd fallen in love, had his children, and healed the people in the town. All the truths of this life had come upon him without him even knowing how or why, or even trying. The moment he'd stopped chasing it, all the beauty of his life had given itself to him. Everything that needed to happen had happened. Right there, he wouldn't change a thing. And at that moment, the man remembered the words of the road. "All these roads will lead you home." Right, now, next we're going to look at another story, but it's in the Old Testament, and it also had several forks in the road. And the background to this story is that it's in the time of David, and it's before he's king. He's being chased and persecuted by the current king, Saul, who's trying to hunt him down because he's so jealous of David's popularity. David has had some great military conquests and has shown himself to be a very strong leader. And when he returns from his battle successes, everyone's talking about him and praising him and honouring him. And Saul, meanwhile, is saying to himself, "What about me? I'm the king. I'm the one who told him to go to these battles. Why don't I get the credit?" So he's jealous, and he has contempt for David, which grows to the point at which Saul ends up trying to kill him. So David and about 600 of his men are on the run, trying to escape Saul's anger. And we begin in 1 Samuel chapter 25. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down to the desert of Paran. Well, David has come to take part in the nation's lament at Ramah for the death of Samuel, who'd been his master and his friend. David had lost his protector, and after mourning him, he and his men go on to the wilderness. It's an area where there are many, many shepherds looking after huge flocks of sheep and livestock. And the Philistines and Amalekites know this location very well and would often try to raid the area. So the farmers sometimes hired men to protect the shepherds and their sheep and flocks. Now, one of the farmers is a very wealthy man, and his name is Nabal. And David and his men protect Nabal's shepherds and livestock from these raids. And the next 2 verses tell us a little bit more about Nabal. A certain man in Maon who had property there at Carmel was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. In ancient times, as you know, wealth was often consisted primarily of livestock. So with his huge number of sheep and goats, as well as his property, Nabal was a very wealthy man. The couple are complete opposites in character. He's described as surly and mean, and Abigail, his wife, as intelligent and beautiful. It seems likely that her marriage has probably been arranged by her parents and not by her choice. Nabal is a descendant of the noble family of Caleb, and his family and wealth are powerful factors in the marriage market. Money talked just as loudly then as it did today. And the next verses continue. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, "Go to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours.' Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your servants, and they will tell you. Therefore, be favorable toward my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them." It was customary in those times that when someone guards your sheep for several weeks, when sheep shearing time comes, you give them a thank you. It wasn't mandatory, but it was the ethical thing to do, and it was expected. So when sheep shearing time comes, David sends 10 of his men to meet Nabal. David tells them what to say, give a very respectful greeting, explain that David and his men have been guarding his flocks and done a superb job. Not a single sheep went missing, nothing disappeared, his shepherds were protected, everything was taken care of. When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name, and then they waited. It was a season of liberality and goodwill. Nabal will come into an abundance of money, selling wool and fleeces, and they have contributed to his success. So they anticipate a very positive response. But unfortunately, his reply was far from being genial and generous. Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where?" Nabal acted rudely and aggressively to David and his men. He was stubborn, greedy, and mean. Nabal's name translates as fool, and his reaction confirms that. It was not a good reply to send to about 600 armed fighting men who have performed an outstanding service for him. David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, "Each of you, strap on your sword." So they did, and David strapped his on as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with their supplies. Now when David heard this wicked reproach, he was exceedingly angry, and he was now at a fork in the road. Would he take time to calm himself, inquire of the Lord what his next step should be, or would he respond in haste with vengeance in mind? David chose his own fork. He ordered 400 of his men to arm themselves and follow him. The situation was becoming increasingly serious. Meanwhile, one of Abigail's servants was facing his own fork in the road. He had heard Nabal hurling insults at David's men, and now he needed to choose which fork he should take. To tell his mistress Abigail all he had heard, offer his forthright, honest observations, and at the same time be rather critical of her husband, or take the other road, remain quiet, not get involved. He was a servant after all. There was nothing to do with him. But he chose the riskier option. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greeting, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day they were a wall around us. The whole time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him." Well, this situation now requires a person with a cool, level head to intervene, an intelligent hero to come and save the day. Abigail immediately recognizes the danger unfolding and responds by organizing a feast fit for a king to be prepared. Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, "Go ahead, I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband, Nabal. Abigail wants to show David honor and respect and heads out to meet him personally. Wisely, she decides not to tell her husband Nabal what she's doing. Abigail is brave. She has no way of knowing how David will react, and she takes the initiative to stave off David's anger and save her husband and her family. And meanwhile, David is traveling nearer, planning evil for evil, vowing to not leave a single male survivor in the house of Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there was David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said, "It's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness, so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him." Then with remarkable tact and intelligence, Abigail fell at David's feet and knew exactly what to say and how to say it, to get past David's anger and into his heart. Though it might be impossible for her to love or respect her husband, she determines to do whatever she can within her power to stand between him and his foolishness. She does not dismiss his dreadful conduct, but she can truthfully tell David that Nabal is a fool by nature and not worthy of his regard. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my Lord sent. And now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the men who follow you. Abigail's assessment of David contrasts rather sharply with that of her husband. Her words show concern for the preservation of David's integrity in view of the office he was later to assume. And Abigail continues, "Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live." Abigail is familiar with David's victories over the Philistines, in which he sought to glorify the Lord rather than advance his own honour. But now David is about to break the peace of the land, to seize the possessions of strangers, and to stain himself with the blood of peaceful citizens. Nabal's insolence, as offensive as it was, did not justify death for him or for any of his people. David would have appeared before God and all the world as an outlaw, and certainly may have been considered unworthy of the crown of Israel. Abigail assures David that the Lord will preserve his life in the midst of danger, and says, "Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling." When the Lord has fulfilled my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed, or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. So again, David is facing another fork in the road. Will he be persuaded by Abigail's appeal, or will he continue to take the path to revenge? And this time he chooses the fork of wisdom. David said to Abigail, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day, and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak." Abigail has not only saved her husband's life, she has stopped David from making a life-altering mistake. David recognizes the providential leading of the Lord in his encounter with Abigail and the crucial role of her actions. Then David accepted from her hand what she brought him and said, "Go home in peace. I have heard your words," and granted your request. So Abigail returns home, planning to tell Nabal all that has happened. She has saved his life and the lives of all of the men in his household. But on seeing Nabal's behaviour when she arrived there, she decides to leave it until the next day. And when he hears Abigail's story of intervention, it has a devastating effect on him. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk, so she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. So David is soon given a convincing proof that it's best to leave vengeance in God's hands. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head." And then David sent his servants to Abigail to ask her to become his wife. She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, "I am your Lord's servant and am ready. to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants." Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife. Throughout his life, David faced numerous forks in the road, and we know he didn't always choose the right one. But we also know he demonstrated incredible faith in God, and in Acts 13, God testifies concerning him, "I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart." Well, we're going to move a bit further along the Bible now. We're going to go into the New Testament, because today, as we've already heard, is Palm Sunday. Jesus was riding his donkey into Jerusalem in the final days of his earthly mission. The crowds that greeted him were also facing a fork in the road. Should they follow him, or should they not? Should they honor him, or should they not? Should they hail him as the king, or should they denounce him as an impostor? We know that some chose to follow Jesus' fork, his path. Luke 19 tells us, "When he came near the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices for all the miracles they'd seen. 'Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest.' They chose the fork in the road that leads to heaven. But others who had seen those same miracles decided to take a different fork, the other road, their own road. And John 12 tells us, even after Jesus had performed so many signs in their presence, they still would not believe him. Luke's gospel tells us, as soon as Jesus came closer to Jerusalem and he saw the city ahead, he began to weep because of what might have been. He had come with astounding miracles, breathtaking teaching, and in fulfillment of the ancient prophecies of the coming Messiah. And yet, when it came to face the fork in the road, some people, instead of taking the fork to eternal life, took the fork that was the spiritual dead end. And Jesus knew what the consequence would be. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes." Now I'd like to read you a poem. It's by someone called Roger McGough. And this poem has the voice of a father. He's quite a rough father. He has a son, but not that close to him. But he's very interested to see how he's made out in life. And so the father has reached a fork in the road. He's made a decision. He's going to come and see his son in Jerusalem because he's heard that his son is part of a group, and this group are creating something of a stir. And the country certainly needs it, for it's under an oppressive occupation by the Romans, as well as being full of the usual rogues and villains. And he's hoping maybe this new leader can mould a real force of change for them. "It is unusual to find me here in town. I never did like the crowds, the smell, the dust, the racket. I can do without it. But it's a special occasion, and well, I haven't seen him in a long, long time. Followed his career with interest, mind. Well, hardly career, but he's made his mark. They all have, and good on them, I say. The whole country needs shaking up, and they're the boys to do it. Things are coming to a head now. History in the making. You can sense it. And that's why I'm here. I may be old, but not too old to lend a hand, lift a sword, and strike a blow for freedom. Unless this Jesus can provide the glue, and by all accounts he knows a thing or two, peace is what he preaches, a coded message that's clear to understand. There'll be no peace until Rome has been driven from this land. And my son knows that, and that's why he got involved, to fight for the cause. A chip off the old block, and no mistake. but smarter. Not like his old man, hot-headed. He likes to plan, take stock, cool in a crisis. There's something happening now. You can hear the crowd cheering. It must be them. The crowd is ecstatic, and the soldiers, under orders, keeping out of the way. Nervous too, a good sign, I'd say. But where's my lad? He's there, he's at the back, following at a slower pace. Looks strangely downcast, I must confess. But no doubt the sight of his old dad will bring a smile to his face. Judas! Judas! It's a powerful poem. The father doesn't know that his own son is the betrayer, but we do. And we're jolted into realizing that Judas had a father and a mother who in their own way loved him. The mystery of why Judas took the fork in the road to betray Jesus remains a mystery. So, another question. Has God ever visited you? Have you ever felt the presence of God? And if so, how did you respond? Every time God visits us, there's a fork in the road. Which fork in the road did you take? His or your own? Now, he may not come as tangibly as riding on a donkey, but at some time in your life, I bet you have found God visiting you, just tapping on your shoulder. Times when you felt drawn to him. And how did you respond? Because every visitation from God is a fork in the road. And it's not too late to take a detour and get back on God's path. You may feel God visiting you today. And if you do, keep in mind Hebrews 3. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. Well, it's Palm Sunday. You've already been given a palm cross. Now it's your turn. You've got an opportunity to make one as well. And under your seat, you will find a slither of paper that looks like this. Now, I can't guarantee success. I'm just saying that from the outset. However, I'll tell you what it should look like at the end. Because the aim is that you've got your own Palm Sunday cross. You might like to give this one, if we manage to make it, to someone else. Okay, so let's have a go and we'll see what happens. About halfway down, you'll see a sort of dotted line. Can you find that? Okay, now we're going to bend the top part so that it goes across and joins onto that dotted line. So it ends up being like a right angle. Okay, so what we've done is we've bent it across like that. Everyone with us? Yeah, we've just bent it across. Excellent. Okay. See the bottom part? Okay, now we're just going to fold that up to where that little sort of triangle is, so that we've made another right angle. We got that one? Yep. Okay, and now the top part again, we're just going to bend it over. So you end up with, it's like a little square in the centre there. How are we doing? Okay. Now we're going to take this left one here and we're just going to bend it behind the square. Okay? So basically you've still got your right angle again, and you've got your square, that little square in the middle. We okay? Don't worry if you've got lost. Okay, now this one here, the right one, you have just made, you won't realise this, but you have just made like a little pocket in that square. And so what we're going to do is bend this to take it through the pocket in the square. I'm going to pull it all the way through. It's hilarious, and you have to laugh. Okay, so you've pulled it all the way through. Right. Now we're going to take I've lost my own instructions now. Here we go. Take this left side, and we're going to push it through that little pocket again. Oh, I know what I've done. I should be doing it this way, bending it forward and pressing it through. Sorry, I'll hold it up like that. Pressing it through there as well, but not all the way through this time, so that it's about the same size as your square in the middle. And I'm going to press it. And that's the first side of the cross. You are so good. Okay? And then this side here, we're going to bend it back and put it through that little pocket through there as well. I bet you love this part, don't you, really? Yeah. I'm just going to even it all up. So now we've got this part. Mine's falling apart, that's all right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this bottom part here and we're going to bend it back and go through that little pocket as well. Leave it some at the end so that we've got the third part of the cross. Okay? And if you turn it over, you've got your cross. Someone's made it. Has anyone else made it? Oh, well done, well done. There are some spare ones, just in case you need them. Very well done. So, this is, of course, it's another palm cross. It's another palm cross for you to do with whatever you wish to. But it's also a fork in the road. It's also a fork in the road. It's a direction when we're never too sure of which way to go. We look at the cross, and that's where we follow it. Okay. Let's end in prayer. Father, facing a fork in the road can be so scary. And we want to move in your direction, not our own. Remind us that wherever we go, there you are. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.